Hey guys, Zach here from Mythos Pedals, and today we're going to do a quick video on how to do an 808 mod on the classic TS9 Tubescreamer. All you really need is a TS9, a couple resistors, an op amp if you want to go that far, and a couple simple tools. You need a soldering iron, I like wire cutters, a multi-tool just for holding like the desoldering braid, stuff like that, and the solder. So I'll bust this thing open and we'll go from there. Okay guys, so I've taken the screw off the board that's right here. And so let's look at what parts we're actually going to be modifying here, what we're going to be changing. So the two resistors that we're going to need to change for the biggest parts of the mod is this one right here and this one right here, right by this cap. This one is a 470 ohm resistor. You can tell by the bands. It has a yellow, purple, brown, and a gold band. And this one is 100K. If I can get a good shot of it here. And you can tell it's 100K by the brown, black, yellow, and gold bands. So the 470 ohm needs to go to 100 ohm. The 100K needs to drop down to a 10K. So these two are the biggest parts of the 808 mod change. The other thing that you can do is change the chip. This TS9 actually has just a cheap little TA7555 or 7558 chip. It's hard to see. And most of the time you'll want to socket this and use a JRC 4558 or an RC 4558. And that's a really simple job, not a big deal at all. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this out. I'll take these two resistors out, and then we'll put in some new ones. Note on new TS9s, some of these chips are a good chip, so you don't even have to do this, but you can do this to do the 808 mod on your new pedal. So yeah, let's heat up the soldering iron. Okay, we're going to start with changing the chip. These little legs right here on both sides are the back of the chip. So we want to desolder these 8 little leads here and clean up those pads, and then we'll put in a socket. That way swapping out op amps is no big deal. So I have some desoldering braid with my little multi-tool here. My soldering iron is nice and hot, and I'm going to try to film this, even though it's kind of awkward with the camera right in front of me here. So pretty simple, just be patient, make sure your iron's nice and hot, and when you touch it to the pads, you should see a little smoke, and it'll start to pull up the solder fairly quickly if your iron's hot. Don't have to push too hard. Some of these are a little tricky because there's additional components right next to the pads of these the op amps legs here. So it's a little easier when the pedal's not being obstructed by a iPhone, but yeah. Some of these have a little bit of solder, so you have to hit it a couple times. And the desoldering braid I've got here might be a little old. If you're not used to using desoldering braid, I highly recommend trying some, just because it makes your life so much easier. Solder suckers on PCBs like this don't always work the best. Yeah, this braid's working a lot nicer here. You want to be careful on some of these components because they are next to other components, and you can suck the solder off those pads too. So if you do that, just hit it with a little fresh solder whenever you're putting in the rest of the parts. But yeah, using a solder sucker on a PCB is sometimes quite a pain. Yeah, here we go. That's working a lot better. All right. You can tell pretty easily when the pads are clean because the hole is really prominent. If you can't easily see that the leg is freed, then chances are there's still some solder holding on to it. And you got to be careful doing this, or you can mess up the trace. And you don't want to do that because you can, you know, just really mess up the PCB. And if you do that, you might lift the trace and you have to scratch off some of the solder mask and stuff. So just have to be careful, go slow. And usually what I like to do is I like to kind of push everything with the iron just to make sure that it's loose enough. And sometimes you'll free things up. But yeah, so that component is pretty much freed up. So let's move on to the resistors. Okay, so when it comes to desoldering the resistors on these, sometimes it's not as obvious where the components are when you're flipping the board back and forth. So the resistors I'm trying to get rid of is this one and then this one right here. So just go slow, be patient, keep an eye out to where you're desoldering. I mean, as long as you're not hurting anything, it's okay to desolder an extra component. I mean, like I said before, you don't want to lift the trace or damage the board in a way. And see, I just desoldered that resistor and it fell right out. So it's down in the chassis of the pedal now, which is no big deal. So now we have to get this other one right here. So pretty simple little job, not a huge mod. I thought I would share how to do this mod because it's, to some people, very mysterious, and it's such a simple modification. I'm not worried about losing any mod business. One thing to keep in mind is you want to have a good hot soldering iron, because if you don't, then you end up pushing all the solder around, and it's real easy to make a mess of everything. It's so hard to do this with the camera in the way. This one's just not wanting to go. So I'm just, sometimes you can heat it and just push it through a little bit and then try to desolder, and that will usually clean the pad right up. This desoldering braid I've got is not the best in the world, so going through a lot of it here. It's tricky taking this stuff apart with the camera just right in your face. There we go. So we got one more little leg, and then we'll put in the new components. I love the TS9 pedal. I think Tubescreamers are pretty much the greatest overdrive. Okay, so everything should be loose now. So you can see that resistor's gone. This one's ready to pop right out. And the chip should, in theory, you can bend some of these resistors out of the way, just be gentle. Should come right out with just a little pull. So let me get my socket and my other components ready, and we'll solder those in. Okay, so the last piece of the puzzle is just putting in the new components. So we've got a socket here, 2 resistors, and then the replacement chip. This is a little Texas Instrument RC 4558P. These sound pretty good. Sound better than what comes in these. So on the socket, it has a little dip on that one side, and it will correspond to the dot on the board. You see that dot by the 4558 there. So you just want to make sure that you orient the socket the same direction as the chip. I mean, really it doesn't matter so long as the chip's installed the right way, but it just make everything easier if you follow suit here. So I like to use my pliers when installing this stuff. It helps get it lined up. Some of these sockets are tricky on these Tubescreamers because it's so tight in there, and actually, yeah, I'm going to have to bend some of these components out of the way. This cap is a little in the way, if I can get it out of the way here. Let's go easy. There we go. So it popped right in. So that's good to go. On the resistors, this is 100 ohm right here. So it is, let me get one close up so I can see. Brown, black, 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 brown. So this is 100 ohm. And this one goes where the 470 ohm resistor was, which was right here. You can put these in either way, doesn't matter. They are not specific as to which way they have to be installed. Let's put them in and then bend the little leads like that so they kind of stay in place. And then here is the 10K resistor. See if I can focus on that. There it is. So it's brown, black, black, red, brown. So this is a 10K. And this will go where the 100K was, which was near the wires on the board. I like to put them in the same way they were installed, with the body of the resistor on the little circle on the board there. So we'll take this one and bend it again. And yeah, so that's all good to go. So we'll flip this over and we'll solder these components in. Sometimes you can just put the board kind of back where it's supposed to be. It'll set easy enough. Sometimes close enough. So let me get some solder, and we'll get this stuff soldered back in. We'll do the resistors first here. There you go. You want it to be shiny, not dull. You want to make sure there's no little bubbles or voids in that solder joint. Do the other side, I kind of desoldered that cap a little bit. So hit that one too. So that's all good. Just keep going, soldering everything else in right there. So there you go, there's all the resistors, all two of them. And you just clip out the little lead wires. Try to pick them up. You don't want those going on the floor and that getting in your bare feet. So there's those. They're all soldered in. I like to look and make sure there's no other bad solder joints and everything looks fine. So flip this thing around and we'll do the socket there. So just hit everything with a little solder. Doesn't take a lot. You can go pretty quick on this. These are gold plated, so they take solder pretty well. You don't want to heat up the board too much. It doesn't need a whole lot. There. So there. Everything's Well, this one's not good yet. Be sure to clean the tip of your soldering iron. There we go. You can kind of see before that one was not. It was a cold joint. So yeah. So that's everything that needs to be soldered on there. So now we take our chip with a little dot going towards the direction of the dot on the board, and the same thing with the socket. You just push that in. Sometimes you have to kind of squeeze it to get the legs to line up. It's not always easy, even less so with a camera in the way. Just kind of pinch the legs in. You'll feel it kind of sit in, then you push it, and you're good to go. So that is all it is to mod a TS9 and do the 808 spec. It's just those two resistors and the chip there. I'll put links to pictures of the components you need to swap if the video is not detailed enough, and you can check those out and do it yourself. If you have any questions, shoot me a message or visit me on my website, which is mythospedals.com. Or hit me up on Facebook. I'm not hard to get a hold of. But yeah, thanks for watching.